Picture a door that only closes from the inside. You're alone. No music, no incense, just your breath and the sound of your own pulse. Then you speak two words softly, like a vow. I remember. The moment you say them with full awareness, something shifts, not in the room, in you. A pressure releases behind the eyes. A quiet heat rises in the chest, and for 1 second, you recognize a truth that can't be argued with. You were never meant to be saved by the crowd. You were meant to be refined. This is the secret nobody warns you about when you turn toward the Hermetic arts. The work doesn't simply change your mind, it changes your position in reality. And that new position comes with a cost. You start losing the old world. Not because you hate people, not because you're better, but because the vessel must seal before the gold can form, and most seekers never seal it. They keep one hand on the door handle, terrified of being alone. This is the alchemy of solitude. You think loneliness begins when people stop calling. It doesn't. It begins the first time you realize you can't pretend anymore. The Hermetic path creates a paradox. The more you pursue real transformation, the less you can live inside the shared dream. Conversations sound scripted, ambitions feel borrowed, and you understand the separation is not social, it's ontological. An old initiate wrote a rule: what happens in the small reflects the vast. But there's a condition. The inner world must be refined first, not as theory, as heat, as pressure, as lived experience. That's why every authentic lineage begins with withdrawal, silence, fewer voices, fewer mirrors, because the work happens inside a sealed vessel. Your own awareness and open air ruins the experiment. The crowd can love you, but they can't enter the furnace for you. Next, we expose what's really being purified, the three forces inside you that keep most people asleep. Hermeticism doesn't begin with rituals, it begins with diagnosis. Inside every person, three forces are always mixing. Flame, the drive to become someone. Hunger, pride, ambition, the part that says, I must. Mist, moving awareness, thought. Mood, imagination, the current that reshapes perception. Stone, the body and the hardened identity that makes you predictable. Most people live on autopilot. Flame burns where culture points. Mist drifts where emotion pushes. Stone obeys routine, comfort, survival. But the Hermetic student separates these forces on purpose. They watch desire instead of serving it. They direct attention instead of losing it. They reshape habit instead of being owned by it. And the moment you do that, you stop being easy to read. People feel it. They can't name it. You become a laboratory walking among spectators. That is the first real loneliness, waking up in a world that prefers sleep. Next, we map the invisible rules that make this awakening unavoidable. Next, we expose what's really being purified. The three forces inside you that keep most people asleep. There's a small, controversial manual some call the Mirror Doctrine. No author, no temple stamp. Just 7 principles that read like laws of reality. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. First, everything begins in mind. Not positive thinking. Something deeper perception shapes the world you can enter. Second, patterns repeat. Your outer life echoes your inner structure. The same architecture, different scale. Third, nothing is still. Attention moves. Emotion moves. Fate moves. The fixed world is a slow vibration. Fourth, opposites are neighbors. Confidence and fear are the same force, at different degrees. Fifth, life swings like a pendulum. If you don't learn rhythm, rhythm will learn you. Sixth, nothing is accidental. Events have chains, even when you can't see the links. Seventh, reality is born from union. Two forces meet, and a third thing appears. Internalize these keys and you stop agreeing with the crowd without saying a word. And that silent disagreement is where the separation begins. Centuries ago, alchemists hid everything in symbols. Kings marrying queens, black suns, serpents eating tails. Most modern people laughed and called it superstition. Then one quiet analyst came along and did something dangerous. He treated the images like a map of the soul. He said, the alchemical books weren't really about metal, they were about integration, about meeting the parts of yourself you denied and turning that denied material into power. He called it the descent into the shadow. And he warned, the first stage feels like blackening, not poetic sadness, real psychic decay, where your old identity rots in your hands. This is where friends start saying you've changed because you have. You stop performing. You stop feeding the comfortable illusions everyone shares. You start speaking with a strange honesty. And when you do that, people either lean in or back away. Next, we enter the first operation of the work, the burn that strips the mask. The first operation is brutal because it's simple. You stop lying to yourself. Calcination is the inner burn, not physical fire, the fire of attention turned inward until nothing fake survives. It starts small. You notice your hunger for approval, the stories you repeat to feel innocent, the quiet resentments you hide under politeness. Then it gets worse. Because the mind defends its image like a kingdom, and when you expose the image, the kingdom panics. This is where many people quit. They call it overthinking. They label it depression. They rush back into noise, entertainment, relationships, and anything that cools the furnace. But the Hermetic student stays. They let pride burn. They let self-deception collapse. They let the false self become ash. And the ash has a strange effect. It makes you less compatible with the old you. You can't unlearn what you saw. Next comes the second operation. Not fire, but water. The stage where boundaries melt. After the burn comes the flood. Dissolution is what happens when the rigid self breaks apart. Suddenly, dreams become loud. Synchronicities multiply. Old memories return with teeth. And the neat line between me and life starts blurring. To the outside world, you look distracted, quiet, withdrawn. People assume you're losing motivation, but something else is happening. Your energy is leaving the surface and sinking into depth. This is dangerous territory, because when the psyche opens, it doesn't only reveal wisdom, it releases everything you avoided. At this stage, many seekers inflate. They interpret every symbol as proof they're chosen. They mistake archetypal power for personal greatness, and they drift into spiritual theater. The real work is colder discipline while drowning. Practices that keep you coherent while the inner ocean rises. You're not becoming insane. You're losing the old borders, and that feels like insanity to the ego. Next comes the operation that saves you. Separation, the ability to discriminate truth from intoxication. Separation is the moment you stop being carried. You learn to watch the storm without becoming the storm. Thought arises, you observe it. Emotion surges, you feel it fully, but you don't obey it. This is the birth of inner sobriety, the capacity to hold opposites without collapsing into either one. Hope and despair. Faith and doubt, love and rage. The Hermetic student learns to extract signal from noise, to recognize which impulses are medicine and which are old addictions wearing new masks. This is where your presence changes. You become harder to manipulate. You don't take the bait. You don't mirror every emotional demand in the room. And that creates a new kind of distance, not coldness, clarity. People sense it and feel exposed. They can't pull you into the usual drama loops, so they call you detached. But what they're really noticing is this: you no longer live inside the collective emotional field. You stand slightly outside it, awake. Next is the turning point, the sacred union conjunction, where the purified forces begin to recombine into something new. Conjunction is where the work stops feeling like subtraction and starts becoming creation you've burned. What was false? You've dissolved what was rigid. You've separated what was poison from what was gold. Now the purified parts meet. Clarity joins instinct. Will joins receptivity. In older images, it's the marriage of sun and moon, the moment you stop fighting yourself in two directions. Your shadow isn't defeated, it's recruited. Your fear isn't removed, it's understood. Then you feel internally complete for the first time, not euphoric stable. This is where you become whole, like you no longer need another person to carry your missing pieces. That's where the loneliness sharpens. Many bonds survive on need, not recognition. When you stop projecting, old connections lose their glue. You can love people sincerely and still feel further away. No going back now. Next comes fermentation. When a spark arrives that you did not manufacture, after conjunction you expect calm. Instead, something alien arrives. Fermentation is the entry of a higher spark into the sealed mixture. The old adepts called it the secret flame, not effort, not technique. A visitation, it can appear as sudden lucidity on an ordinary morning, a wave of meaning too precise to be self-made, a quiet joy with no object, or a frightening expansion, as if the surface world turns transparent. This is where the Galilean teacher warned his inner circle about chasing signs, because the mind will try to own the experience to crown itself special. Fermentation tests humility. Can you receive revelation without building a new identity from it? And the gap widens again. After touching that altitude, small talk feels heavier. Old cravings feel childish. You can still function, but you feel like a visitor wearing your old face. Next is distillation, turning the flash into a stable way of being. Stay sober. Fermentation gives you a glimpse. Distillation makes you stabilize it. This stage is repetition, refinement, truth tested inside ordinary hours. You learn to carry two clocks at once. One measures deadlines, bills, and social roles. The other measures silence, intention, and attention itself. Now the work becomes invisible. No visions, no fireworks, just remembering. You speak, but you stay inwardly still. You act, but you don't abandon the witness. Each cycle strips another layer of vanity, the desire to be advanced, the hunger to be understood, the hope someone will certify you. Humility arrives by pressure, not philosophy. And the loneliness sharpens, because most people live from one clock only. From the outside you look ordinary, maybe even boring. Inside, the water clears, the breath steadies, and the gold concentrates. Next comes coagulation, when the volatile finally becomes stable. Coagulation is the end of wandering. Not because life becomes easy, but because you stop being scattered. The volatile parts of you, moods, cravings, impulses, lose authority. They still appear, but they no longer define you. Something else becomes the center. A calm axis that holds, even when the world shakes. The old texts called it the stone, not an object, a state. Consciousness fixed in clarity without becoming rigid. Present in the body, awake in the invisible. From here, you can enter society without being swallowed by it. You can speak politely without lying. You can love without begging. You can act without needing applause. And yet the loneliness becomes more refined, because real meeting is rare. Most relationships are still built on projection, not recognition. You don't hate people. You simply stop pretending the old contracts satisfy you. Now we reach the hidden crisis point, the night that tests whether this stone is real. There is a stage the adepts rarely describe, because language can't escort you there. No teacher can carry you. It arrives after momentum, after discipline, right, when you think the work is paying off. Then the light disappears. Practices feel mechanical. Symbols go silent. The certainty you depended on turns cold. And the mind whispers, it was fantasy. This is not ordinary sadness. It is the collapse of meaning itself. The ego, cornered, makes its final move. It would rather destroy the path than surrender the throne. That's why the crisis feels intimate yet unshareable. Friends offer fixes, sleep, distraction, but the wound isn't in the schedule, it's in identity. If you endure, something breaks open. The self that begged for reassurance exhausts itself, and another center appears, silent, impersonal, unshakable. Next, the guardian of the threshold and the two words that lock the vessel. The old initiates called it the guardian of the threshold. Not a demon with horns. A psychological force that appears as your deepest fear, madness, isolation, meaninglessness, annihilation. Its function is simple, to make sure you don't enter deeper truth with a divided will, because a half-ready consciousness breaks under that weight. And here is the part that makes this documentary different. There is a micro-operation hidden inside every stage, a two-word seal that mature seekers learn to speak in solitude. Not as prayer, not as begging, as recognition, I stand. Two words that collapse the urge to escape. Two words that refuse distraction. When spoken clearly, they anchor you inside the furnace without negotiation. I stand means I do not flee the dark interval. I do not outsource my salvation. I hold the tension until it transforms. Most people never speak this seal, even if they understand the philosophy, because it ends the last comfort, the fantasy that someone else will carry you. Next is the final integration: how to live this without becoming bitter, strange, or alone forever. If you've made it this far, solitude stops feeling like punishment. It becomes a chosen climate, clean air for the inner work. This is where the Hermetic paradox completes itself. You re-enter the world, but you don't belong to its trance. You can attend gatherings, hold conversations, build a life, without surrendering the silent axis that formed in the vessel. The old analyst said the integrated person becomes transparent to themselves. Thoughts move through, emotions rise and fall, but nothing sticks as identity. And that transparency changes how you relate to everyone. You don't need to be understood. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to recruit, because truth doesn't require an audience. Real companionship becomes rarer, but more real. You recognize it instantly. Two awake presences meeting without masks. Not love based on need, recognition based on clarity. So if the path has separated you, don't call it failure. It may be the seal forming. Speak the two words privately. When the pressure rises, I stand. And let the furnace finish its work. Because the gold was never out there. It was always the consciousness strong enough to remain in the flame.